I think all of those issues, time, children are always an issue in house meetings. There's just not a perfect way. I don't think any of it all matters, but I think you have to just find what works about time and what day and all those things. That all depends on what kind of wineskin you're birthing. The most important part is, because all of that you just have to work it out. You just have to work it out. And it depends in a lot. Depends on who and what your focus is. But on the elements that should not be compromised, again, let's just say it's coupon. Because that's what I probably know the least about. I mean, as far as the whole thing, I'm skeptical about, if they're issuing a bunch of coupons, I'm like, okay, but when I go in there, is the price going up? So, right? Come on. I've been in a lot of deals through the years. But I think what should not be compromised is the things that you are the most passionate about, and certainly the issue of kingdom purpose. What is this kingdom purpose? How is this connected to something? If we're doing this coupon, we're having these groups, okay, why are we wanting to save this money? Or why are we wanting to get this group together? What's the goal here? And then we make that goal connect to kingdom purpose, either within that group or outside the group. Are we doing this so that we're then going to in turn reach out and do something, or are we as a group, this is our focus, and then we want things like prayer and Bible study. All of that is up to you and the Holy Spirit. But the things that can't be compromised on is this intentional, consistent connection to whatever it is we're doing. As wild and crazy as it can be, it's got to be connected to kingdom purposes. And again, that connects to what's God saying. I don't want to be doing something and it be just a good thing when God's speaking to the whole church and the whole earth, or God's speaking to the church in my nation, and He's saying some real clear things, and I'm off over here doing something that's not even connected, or it may be, and it won't be like anything. The trap is you wouldn't be doing anything bad. You'd just be doing something good, And then the next thing, and I'm just going to say this to make a point. I'm not trying to be legalistic, but when David brought the Ark of the Covenant back in the Old Testament, and he built the tabernacle of David, and you know the story. There was a manifested presence of God. The Ark of the Covenant was there, and it was not behind a veil. It was not hidden. And David was dancing and celebrating, and there was no sacrifice except the sacrifice of praise. Well, it was only 6 miles, if I remember right. It was only 5 or 6 miles to Shiloh, where the tabernacle of Moses was still set up, and the priesthood was still sacrificing offerings. The structure was still there. The procedures were still in place. The rituals, if you will, were still going on, and the presence of God wasn't even there. And I know we've heard lots of, again, that's one of those things that becomes cliche, but 5 miles away, David and the presence of God and the Ark of God's presence was in the tabernacle of David, and God was speaking to a nation in the tabernacle of David and changing history. Now later, that was just a window that opened. We didn't stay with the tabernacle of David. Later, the ark went back, and then went back into the tabernacle, and then eventually we built the temple. But I don't want to be in Shiloh operating as a priest in an empty building, so to speak. And I'm not saying God, removes His presence. But I'm just saying, good sometimes is the enemy of best. I'll just stop there. So I think one of the main things is to keep it connected to some specific strategic, intentional kingdom purpose. Tiffany, for example, I keep coming back to this thing about you guys and you blessing these businesses. And sending and having intercession for businesses to prosper. You're not only trying to just lead them to Jesus, but what Tiffany's doing in Claremore House of Prayer, and she wears lots of hats and she's got lots of, she's spiritually pregnant with about 5 or 6 things, and we're going to see them all birthed and blessed. Hallelujah. Amen. And and so I'm honored to be her covering in those things. And when I was there in the conference, and we stood them up and commissioned them. You understand? Because again, there's that intentional, relational connection with the apostolic and prophetic in real relationships. But what they're doing in their business model is then this is just one little thing. But they send intercessors, and Tiffany, you can send something, or we need a way to, anyway, you can share this. But they started reaching out to businesses in their communities and saying to their businesses, we're praying for you to prosper. We're praying for your business to be blessed. We're praying for your business to succeed and not fail. And as part of praying for the community, we're praying for you. And here's a gift from us to you. And it had a card with a blessing on it. It was a gift basket. And so, now think about this. And I probably can't articulate as good as Tiffany can, but here's what grabbed me about that is that in our culture, in education, in media, in the culture, in our young people, everything about business is negative because the culture is bombarding us, and this administration has a socialist economic perspective. And so if you're going to be a successful businessman, the only way for you to have been successful, if you've made money, if your business has done good, if you've started new businesses and then you started another one, then you must be greedy and you must be corrupt and all of those things. So how much of what an incredible kingdom purpose.
Yes, amen.
Reaching out to businesses, and yeah, we want them to, if they're greedy, they need to get saved, you know what I'm saying? But they're reaching out to the business, and we want you to know that we're believing for you to prosper. OMG. When's the last time you saw that happen? Never. I mean, we all think it, but we haven't done anything about it. You know what I'm saying? And remember the deal with Chick-fil-A back last year? How wonderful was that? Yeah. Man, we've never seen anything like that. A movement, we the people rose up. So there's these models and there's these expressions, and so Tiffany, for example, has purposely not created a 501c3, a tax-exempt nonprofit. She's going a different route because she wants to be able, this is just what's been in her heart about one aspect of their ministry. She wants to be able to go in and say to the city council if she needs to, hey, we purposely want our property or want our building or whatever it is on the tax rolls so that we can sow into we want to sow into the tax base. I mean, wow. And I'm not saying, see, that's not a template that everybody's supposed to do. But in her, but where she's at, what God's saying. And so again, but that's very connected. That's very connected to the kingdom purposes of God in the nation right now. Because we're being taught, for one thing, we're being taught that that prosperity is immoral. That wealth and success is immoral. And so we've lost the cultural mind. We've lost the cultural battle because especially the young generation, because they're products of public education, because they're being taught that at college level, that socialism as an economic model is the most moral way to have the economy of a nation, which, by the way, completely goes against the Bible. Different class, different setting, we won't go there. But free markets, free enterprise, freedom to buy and sell, freedom to create, freedom to make a profit, freedom to create wealth is the biblical pattern for nations and economies. It's the biblical pattern. And so socialism isn't just inaccurate, it's deceptive, it's demonic, it's contra-biblical. So I'll get off of that. So does that make sense? So on the business thing, I've been talking to another lady I know in our area, and she's gotten really involved in the business. She's a retail manager, and she's in it. She's not in Austin, but she's in one of the surrounding communities. And I've been saying to her, well, your real heart is for San Marcos, and so you don't have to you don't have to come and have a thing for Austin like I do. For me, it's all one big picture. You know, so she's been getting involved in the downtown business stuff, in the Chamber of Commerce, and all of those things. And I'm saying to her, hey, how long do you think it'll be before you're holding a business lunch and you're convening it or hosting it or whatever, and you're having some sort of luncheon for business leaders where somebody's giving their testimony and you're inviting people in, or maybe it's in a house meeting. What if business leaders were going to come together once a week or once a month and pray for the community, pray for the economy, pray, you know, and I mean, it's open-ended. Anything can happen out of that. What about trading business strategies? What about, you know, one of the things about having Josephs in the gate, remember I talked about that earlier today, about Josephs in the gate? One of the things about having Josephs in the gate, and you guys were talking a little bit about this in San Antonio, is that, you know, out of a men's fellowship, everybody in the men's fellowship knew which guy had a business, and hey, this guy needs a job, and well, we know this guy over here, and hey, he needs a job. Well, this guy over here can help with that, put him to work, and he needs a place to stay. Well, so we know another guy, he can help him have a place to stay. So that one thing can lead to another, and so having Joseph's in the gate, so why would we not, as business leaders, come to the table and say, hey, let's talk about what we can do in our community. And it might not be about hunger or poverty, but it could be, what if it was about, hey, what can we do to, it could just be anything. As business leaders, what can we do to support each other? Who has what resources? What can we, and, you know, and depending on if they're already all Christians or if they're not, or who you're wanting to reach, or some Christians started, pull the others in, you know, pray over their businesses. Share with them why, it wouldn't have to be the focus, but you can share why God wants your business to succeed. Or here's the, you know, I mean, there's some good resources around that have been around a long time, you know, Dennis Peacock stuff, and Doing Business God's Way book, and other stuff. But that's just a starting place. Then anywhere, it can go anywhere. I was up in Salem, Massachusetts, the witch place, right, years ago, and so they took me to a building, the Intercessors, thank God. So they took me to this 2 or 3 story building. It wasn't real wide, but it was tall. And at one time, the witches openly met there, and the building was painted completely black on the outside. They painted it black on the outside, and the building's old, has gargoyles. I mean, it looked, you know, I could just picture it. It looked creepy, you know. And they had seances, and there was always some kind of occult meetings going on in those buildings right downtown in the square in Salem, Massachusetts. They hung their sign out, and the pagan groups would meet there, and the witch groups would meet there, and there was all this stuff going on in these buildings. And everybody would complain about it. Everybody was like, oh, how bad that is. So some of the businessmen joined with the intercessors and some of the pastors. And they just began to pray over that building. But the group, as they met, it was always about, we're targeting that building. The focus group of this house meeting, if I remember right, it was a house meeting, they'd come together as they targeted that building. They said, we're going to pray, and we believe that God's going to show us a way that that building is going to come out of the hands of the pagans and into the hands of the church. And so they prayed, and I don't remember how long it took, but eventually the finances dried up, and that building went up for sale. And that group raised the money, prayed in, targeted, prayed in the money, raised the money, and they bought that building and remodeled it, painted it white. And when they took me to it, this building was painted white on purpose, and they had some kind of something in it that was, you know, Christian, and then some kind of outreach thing, and I don't remember if there was a food deal, but it was, you know, that's not exactly a new thing, but the fact is that you know, there are so many things like that and beyond that God is going to begin to bring forth. And so I feel an unction here for a moment just to address this thing about safe houses. because I do want to talk. Are we good? I do need to interject here just a little bit about. I want to not get this covered on some thinking about legal issues. I don't have a lot here. I just want to get this up and out. Is that all right, you guys? Are we tracking here? And this thing with safe houses, and I already said this, but especially, first of all, emotionally. More than ever before, people are fatherless spiritually. And out of that, and especially young adults, they're spiritually fatherless. And obviously in America we have a natural problem in broken homes and fatherlessness and that thing. It all connects. But there's an increasing need for there to be places where people can build real relationships and real community, if you will, where they're safe to be themselves, to talk about anything, to be released in the gifts, to be able to pray, share, prophesy, whatever you fill in the blank there. But we need places where people are safe. And first of all, that means safe from rejection, safe from misunderstanding, safe from falling through the cracks, safe from isolation. And we need a new kind of house meeting. Boy, I mean, I run out of words. I'm asking God to help me with articulate new language. I mean, literally, we need new language. I've gotten close to a dear man named William Word, and he's a prophet. And he's, in most people's worlds, he's a nameless, faceless guy, and he's one of the most articulate men I've ever met. But I found out as he and I have shared some deep things together a couple of times that he said, you know, God, he said, you know, Bob, he said, I spend a lot of time asking God to empower me with articulate prophetic language that's specific, not prophesying, but prophetic in the sense that the specific words and terms and phrases would be given to him by God to define, describe, communicate, and articulate truth that's right now prophetic truth in ways and in terms and in phrases that are so clear for right now, but they're not the ones we're used to hearing. He said, I spend a lot of time. He lives alone. He's never been married. He doesn't have kids. His health is very bad. He was in a horrible, horrible wreck 8 or 9 years ago. Spent 2 years in a hospital. Crushing physically and emotionally. Just God has done some things in him I've never quite seen before, and he just kind of amazes me at times. And that has really stuck with me, this thing about the need for a language that can articulate. And it's really challenged me, see. It's really stretched me. Even in the natural, I'm like, man, I need to be more careful and more alert and to give more effort to using real specific words and terms to define, to make the effort to in God, so that God can give us new terms, new languages to help define all the new things He's doing. I really believe that, so I just put that out to you. My vocabulary, I grew up, you know all that stuff. The next thing you know, your language, your vocabulary is full of words like that, and stuff, and how many times are you saying that? And so anyway, it's really challenged me.
Tony Blair is supposed to have a place in Texas. He really is.
Tony Blair.
Yeah, from he's in the U.S. now, but
really.
Tony
yeah.
Blair.
Yeah.
Repeat the comment.
Tony Blair.
What's that?
Repeat the comment. Further.
Paul is somehow in this. I know this is going somewhere in the middle of this bit about language. That Tony Blair's moved to Texas, right?
Yeah, but he was very eloquent.
Oh yeah, he is.
Very.
Yeah. He's using. We're talking about Tony Blair just because he is a good example of somebody that's very articulate, very intentional about the words and terms. I used to listen to him a lot.
Yeah.
I did. You know, he came down on the wrong side sometimes, but man, he was articulate. So I get what you're saying. Some of it you just get by intentionality, but well, because Texas is a Goshen, but we won't go there. That's a prophetic word from Chuck and others, and prophets and intercessors are hearing that everywhere. And Ken Beck, he's been. I mean, anyway. You know, the Mormon prophet believes that Texas is like a place to be. I don't know. And so anyway, we need a new language. And so forgive me for that, but that we need that. Because some of you have that. Some of you have that in you and you just don't think you do. And you have to be intentional about it. I never think about saying, okay, God, literally give me a word here that's not necessarily in my vocabulary right now or has to be in there. To articulate things.
Something that I've heard God say, be really particular about the words you use and just maybe even purposely get away from the Christian lingo.
Exactly.
Because it's become so common and it's
exactly. Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Beth's making the point. That we just overuse certain phrases over and over and over, and then they get rid of it. Anyway, so I'm trying to be diligent enough to remember to do that. Say, okay, God, I was pausing here because I was trying to think of a quote, and it's not just Revelation, but anyway, I was thinking there was a quote here from Bill. I would just. One day he said, and I'll probably mess it up by quoting, he said, oh yeah, I don't have it in the email, I have a notebook, I take notes when I'm on the phone at home, I have a spiral notebook that every time I'm on the phone I have names, dates, places, and written records of what we talked about. He said, Bob, I'm inclined to the Holy Spirit. He said, Bob, I've inclined my heart so that God might speak to my spirit by His Spirit. And he said something else that was just so articulate. Well, and that's not a big profound thing, but just the fact, by the way, he used the word inclined, he was using it in a very Old Testament kind of way. I've inclined myself. It's like I've chosen, I've postured, I've purposely. Anyway, enough about that. But you know what I'm saying? So there's language that we need to do, and he's been a real voice. I'm looking at the list of questions. And let me say, so let me address these legal issues a little bit, because I'm talking about this thing about safe houses. So people need those places where they're safe, and they need to feel safe, and it just dawned on me how rare that is. A couple of years ago, you know, I was sharing about, I began to hear God say, like I'll never forget one night, I was just at it happened to me once at Northgate and once at Southgate in our ministry, and I just heard God say, you know, you're safe here. And you know, my intellect said, well, of course I'm safe here. But then I was like, what? And I heard the Lord say, you're safe here. And it wasn't like God defined that, but I began to feel safe because of what I was hearing Him say on the inside of me. And so you know how that works in the Spirit. It wasn't like anything my intellect didn't exactly already know. But I began to, and so in this, there was instantly this gentle, there was this fatherly affection that rose up in me as I opened my eyes and sort of looked around the room while everybody else was worshiping and had their eyes closed. And so there was, so that in me all of a sudden there was just this desire, like I would with my kids. It's like, man, I want these guys to be safe. Lord, I want them to be safe. And it affected me. And then it kind of, and I never heard terms, I never got all this stuff, you know, and I purposely didn't let my intellect go there, because I was like, you know, my nature's like, well, God, what does that mean? And does that mean this is going to happen safe, which way? And, you know, the prepper thing, and the blah, 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 blah. And it was kind of like I just couldn't go there. I knew enough to know not go there, don't let my intellect kick in. You're safe here. And I just kind of looked around, you know, and I just felt the Father's heart, really, I guess is what it was. But in me, I felt it, and I was like, well, Lord, I want them to be safe. I want your people to be safe, and I want them to have a safe place. And the next thing I knew, I was praying this. You hear me? The next thing I knew, I found myself praying, Lord, we need more safe places. I don't know why that's a thing with me. I mean, you know, my testimony, I was like back, you know, just don't even talk to me about house meetings and blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, there was something in me, and I just began to see houses, places where people were gathered, and and nobody's perfect, and this seldom happens, but they were all warm and fuzzy and sweet, and you know. But it was not about what's going on in them. It was about that they were safe emotionally. That's a whole thing in itself. But also then, and also then, JD, like later, I was beginning to pray over it, and you know, but they were safe physically. That right now, the best place to be under the radar is in houses. Now see, the enemy's trying to get ahead of us here because there's already some legal issues across the country about house meetings. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, and so regardless of what kind of house meeting you're doing, that's a safe place. Now I have some things in me that I'm not called to do. But the Lord began to remind me when I first got saved in the early 70s. The very first charismatic church in our town were mostly Missouri Synod Lutherans who got kicked out of the Missouri Synod Church over tongues. The pastor had got filled with the Spirit and language of the Spirit, and got kicked out. So they actually started the very first non-denominational independent charismatic church in our city. And they eventually, it was just a year or two, so this was like 1973, 1974, they bought some property right on the edge of town. Wasn't a great property. And so out in that area there were some homes kind of scattered around within a couple. It wasn't like a subdivision. It was like, you know, there was a house and a half acre over here, and a quarter of a mile away there's another house. And there was kind of an area, I won't even call it a subdivision, and those guys all began to buy houses in that area on purpose. And boy, did most people think that was just too weird. In 1973, you just didn't do that. I mean, if you did, what are you going to do? A hippie commune out there? But they called it the Way of the Cross, named the church that way, and people started buying and moving close together. And the Lord just began to remind me through the years things I'd seen, and so I think in the sense of safe houses, I think it can go to the place where people. So let me just run some stuff at you real quick here. Okay, one issue is that all over the nation, cities and counties are going broke because they've overspent and they've convinced the voters to let them do with tax things nobody can afford. And so the next thing you know, even a city is bankrupt or a county is bankrupt. And so then the tax rate in certain counties, like I tried to voice a voice up in the Pflugerville and some of that area. There were 5 different taxing entities up in that part of the region that had the ability to all raise the taxes in their little piece of the puzzle. And then if all 5 of them raise the taxes, people are going to be like, OMG. So what happens is people start talking about, okay, we're all going to move out of this county. We're all going to move out of this county and relocate somewhere. And obviously people are coming to Texas from, the West Coast and New England because of economy, taxes, etc. So I think in that we got to see the big picture. And I think now's the time. I'm just saying now's the time I know, Beth, you guys you've had a thing in your heart to get some land, not for the purpose of that, but in getting the land, you wanted to have the freedom to have a place to hold meetings, or for it to be a safe house or an apostolic hub or whatever it might be, you know. A barn burning, I don't know. So, safe houses, I think my point in that is that we need to be aware that God may be speaking to some people about living close to each other, or about our safe houses being physically safe. Like for example, real quick, I live in San Marcos. People ask me all the time, why in the world don't you move into Austin? Well, because the house I live in San Marcos, it only has 1,700 square feet in it, but it's got a big front porch across it. It's got a great back porch in the back. So an acre, it's a beautiful little acre. I'm not in an HOA. Hello? I'm not in an HOA. 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 I live outside the city limits. I'm not in an HOA. I live outside the city limits. And so...
And you're not in the dumpy neighborhood, and you still don't live in the
And I'm not, you know, the dumpiest house in our whole neighborhood is next door to me, with the 3 or 4 of their junky old Trans Ams. But anyway, I will take liberty over pretty anytime. And the other thing is about my house is, that same place, if you could even find such a thing in Austin, would be $350,000 to $400,000. Those places like that in San Marcos can be bought for like $175,000. So, and I've been in that house 12 years. I can't afford to leave. I can't afford to move to Austin. Okay. But the other thing is I'm not in an HOA. No, I'm not in an HOA. But you can also, you can park about 10 or 12 cars. Now listen, you can park about 10 or 12 cars in my driveway and area. You can easily park 10 or 12 cars. And where I'm at, so far, nobody's going to say a word. Nobody cares, you know.
Because there's no HOA.
Because there's no HOA. And the people on the other side of me who are good people, they're hardly ever there. They own another place. They're gone all the time. The guy that lives across the street from me and over a little bit, he got married and left that home. He's just sitting there. And so I'm a safe place. I'm just not close to anybody. You guys are welcome to come to my house, but you know what I'm saying? So safe houses, we got to start thinking about things like that. I'm not talking about getting paranoid and stuff, but I am saying, okay, let's take into account, if you're going to buy a house, or if you're thinking about something, let's take into account how much limitations might be imposed on us, and let's avoid all of them that we can. Let's avoid all of them that we can. Yeah, it's a real deal. I mean, I'm trying to stir up the legislators about these HOAs. They had to go through the legislature last session to take away some of the power of homeowners associations, because in Texas for a while they could come after you they could come after your home if you were behind on your HOA fees.
Exactly.
They could repossess your house.
They did. We knew one person that happened to.
And so these folks are saying they knew somebody that happened to San Antonio. So they changed that in Texas, by the way. But it took an awakening among conservatives to change that through the
And
legislature.
they added other authority to them too.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of... So is there a question, comment there?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you do when in the safe house someone reveals that their family is doing something illegal? How do you keep your group safe, everyone safe, and at the same time make sure everyone's honoring the law? Slightly paraphrasing.
Is the person whose family is breaking the law, are they the host?
Yeah, that's what I understood. I'll wait for them to respond, but
Yeah, I want to double check.
it's specific what they're doing. If you want to come look at it,
Well,
it's Oklahoma.
Right. Is it okay?
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm going to ask them, whoever, can we talk about this openly and specifically in public here, guys? This will be archived. This will be archived. This will be archived. No, this is awesome. This is good, but we want to deal with it rightly.
takes a little while to get a response.
I'll take a look here.
Okay.
Oh, it's not that bad.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Those two.
Is that the host?
I'm guessing so.
No.
No. The
Or
answer
just somebody in the group?
is no. I don't.
Which no? No, they're not the host?
Or no, not
No.
discuss it publicly. I don't know.
Okay.
It didn't say, it just says no.
Okay. Is it in is the issue we're talking about where the law's being broken, is that in is that going on in the house that the meeting's at? This is good. No, this is good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. In light of what I understand from the situation, I would say the group needs to move. And you'll just have to find a way to do that.
Should there be some sort of excommunication?
No.
Or should... No, it's not the host. Yes, we can discuss it. Okay. Sorry,
Oh.
there's a delay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not the host. Yes, we can discuss it.
Okay. Good. It's not the host. That helps.
Okay, so...
Because, man, this is where the rubber meets the road. See, this stuff preaches by the mile, lives by the inch. So the question's about, some pretty severe laws being broke. But if it's not the host, so somebody's just in the group,
Yeah.
and that person's doing this in their house or their family. Or,
Yes.
Okay. Well, then that person needs to be lovingly confronted. And see, that goes into some other issues about leadership. I kind of want to finish up. This is connected to legal, but it also goes to leadership issues. Because whatever group we form, whatever the focus is, whatever God births, you're never going to get away from the fact that there's got to be leadership. And leadership always raises the eternal question: who's in authority? How much authority do they have? And because that's a biblical principle, and you can't get away from it. So, in this situation, regardless, if there's not a structure, so to speak, if there's not any kind of defined leadership, if it's not a team, if this is just a group of people meeting together and they're just coming to worship and pray together, there's not any specific focus, or what I'm saying, there's not this agenda, or in a good sense. I mean, if there's not an established leadership, there may be just somebody hosting it, or maybe somebody's just the leader or the facilitator. You understand what I'm saying? Some groups are like that. There's like a 912 group. They're not going to have somebody, because it's not a biblical thing. There's just people getting together. They're peers. They're all peers. And there's a facilitator. And that person is the host, and he kind of guides the meeting. But he's not an authority, and he doesn't have any authority to speak in anybody's life. So if your group is like that, and you know that somebody's cooking crank in the backyard on their own time, there may not be any established leadership roles. But if you're friends, even as brothers, you have the relational authority as a peer to go, two of you who know it for a fact, you got to know your facts, and two of you need to go and lovingly confront that person and say, hey, we're here just as friends, we're here just as brothers, we're here, our sisters, because we love you, but we know that this is going on, and you have to do something about this. You've got to, if you're doing it, you got to quit.
It's part of the safeness. It's like, surely they know what they're doing is not right, and maybe they're in that situation because they want to be confronted in a loving way.
Right.
Don't just call the police on me and have me hauled off.
Yeah, exactly.
Change my life.
Yeah, and that's my point, is that the two people go to confront them. You're not going to just, hey, let's call the cops and turn them in. You're going to confront them. That's what Paul talked about. It's like, and I'm not saying that somebody commits murder, we don't go to the courts, but he's saying when there's disputes among them. So it just goes to the Matthew 18 principle and others that if somebody, if your brother sins, you and a witness, you go and you lovingly confront them on a personal, discreet basis, and you begin to, and you got to go there. You just got to go there. You got to go there. You can't leave it undone.
It looks like that this may have started with a confession that they were doing this illegal.
Okay, and I confess that in front of the whole group.
That's what it sounds like. It says, what do you do when in the house, safe house, someone reveals that they're family? Someone reveals that their family
Is doing this.
Yeah.
Well,
That speaks a lot to the group that you feel safe enough to confess it.
Right. And Beth's bringing out the point, that's a huge thing about this person feeling safe enough that they could confess and know that they're not going to be like, you know, hey, we're gonna handcuff you while we wait for the cops, kind of deal. You know, so respond in that way. Respond as, you know, in the receiving the confession and then holding them accountable. I mean, are they opening up, or they want help, or they want ministry? Then walk with them in that. But they have to know. They have to know that at some point, you know, you can't be party to hiding something that dramatic as somebody cooking cranks on them. That at some point, if it's because if it's, you know, that stuff's dangerous and let those places blow up all the time, kill people and stuff. And so, you know, so walk this person out if you can. But that's, in one sense, that's a beautiful example of what a safe house is. So sorry, Chickens, there's a big delay in the electronic aspect of this, and so
she clarified it's the family. It's the family, not the individual. So
that's even better. Yeah. And that makes it more difficult. It's a family member. There's a person that's a member of the group, and it's not that person breaking the law, but that person's family in their house, I guess, is doing this. And so that person, if they're not, and it may be a husband or it may be a wife, I don't know, but you know, eventually that person may have to get out of that place. There's all time. But you do, since he or she confessed it, you know, I wouldn't continually talk about it as a group, because you're going to get 100 opinions. Whoever the kind of organic leaders are, or whoever has the most relationship with that person, a couple of you deal with this situation in private. Amen. Tough situation, but awesome. I mean, but it's awesome. That's what we, you know, that's what we're doing.
And that's where real deliverance will come for this person that's in this situation.
Exactly.
Repeat the comment.
Comment is that in that there's real deliverance. That's how these kind of relationships and settings, that's how real deliverance can come in that person's life. So just real quick, let me talk about these legal issues. I'm not going to talk about persecution so much, but you guys do need to be aware that there are there have been some very targeted legal issues about home meetings around the country, and also in the issues. One issue, and we won't go there, it's just that more and more like public institutions like schools are getting very negative towards church groups renting their facilities and etc. And so the bottom line is, if a thing like a school, if they rent any of their facilities to any kind of outside groups, they have to rent to all outside groups. UT's been getting away with that for years and years and years by hand-picking who they let, and they always are. I remember years ago I went in and we tried to rent one of their buildings to have a rally call meeting in, and this lady just looked at me and said, we would never, you know, kind of hands on her, we would never let that happen. You know, and so those kind of things are on the increase, but most of those are easy. They're challenged by, you know, easy to challenge by the Liberty Institute will help people in that. ACLJ will help in those kind of deals. American Center for Law and Justice. What I want to talk about real quick before we take a break is there are, and you can Google some of this. I just need you to know that, for example, quite a few years ago, not too many, let's see, 11, well yes it has been, 11, about 11 years ago, Les and I leased a house in San Marcos. A nice house. And the guy we were leasing from, and we went through a realtor. He had his house leased through a realtor, and so we were walking through the house, and he was with us, and he was kind of sizing us up. He was an older guy, church-going guy, older couple, good church members, and he understood that I was a minister, pastor, whatever his language. And so we were going to lease this house, and he said while we were standing there, and the leasing agent was standing there with us in the house, he said, now I don't want a bunch of cars here, and I don't want you guys having a bunch of church meetings and Bible studies in this house. Or religious meetings maybe, but I think he said Bible studies. And before I could answer, the leasing agent, God bless her, warm and smiley, she said, oh, now Mr. So-and-so, she said they have the right to do anything like that they want to. You can't, and it fixed it. But I just thought, wow. Here's a guy who goes to church every Sunday, and he said, no, I don't want well, maybe his thing was just slip of mind, whatever, but around the country there's an increasing number of lawsuits filed against people having church and stuff in their meetings. A couple of them have made publicity that they weren't doing such a great job. But here's the thing you need to watch out for, and I want to get off of this. Watch out for zoning. Watch out for zoning laws. Be aware of what's going on in your city, your county. Watch out for zoning laws. Obviously, nobody's going to pass a law that's against Christianity. But what they will do is they'll pass a city ordinance. They'll pass a city ordinance about parking or about traffic in a neighborhood. And did I mention HOAs? Watch out for these HOAs, because if you've got too many cars parked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're making decisions, or you're helping people make decisions, or you're praying about birthing something, be very aware of things like zoning. Because the next thing you know, they'll be coming and saying, oh, you can't have 7 cars parked in front of your house. Or on the street, or wherever. Yeah, see, and so it goes on and on, and so
you can't take your garbage can out until the day that...
Right, on and on and on as far as HOAs. Ridiculous.
You want to sleep in.
Common sense goes out the window, etc. on that. But watch out for zoning, watch out for HOAs, and here's the other thing. Apartment complexes, and my daughter's a property manager. She manages 3 different properties. Watch out for these apartment deals, because apartment complexes tend to have more and more rules all the time. And most people tend to not question them. Karen's HOA off the apartments, back to the HOA, and Karen in ours subdivision, the HOA, because some people got frustrated about door-to-door guys, so the HOA was going to say, well, we won't let anybody come and knock on anybody's door in the neighborhood, and da-da-da-da-da. So when the community email came through Karen, she's like, wait a minute, this is a constitutional issue. You can't do this. And by the way, I might not want the Avon person, but I might want the Austin American person to knock on my door and want to sell me something. We can't just make this big blanket thing, because that takes my rights away. I might want somebody to come knock on my door. And so everybody, and so Karen just brought some comment, and all kinds of people went, oh, we hadn't thought of that. They were just going to buy into it. So watch out. If you're in an HOA, if you buy property in one, stay alert. Stay alert. You don't have to give your life to it, but just stay on top of it. Pay attention. The other thing is apartments. More and more people are living in apartments. And I went off without the notes of it, but there are some ministries birthing that are designed to go into apartment complexes and move into them and become missionaries into apartment complexes. Years ago, we ran into a thing when I was doing the cell groups or whatever, but we also had a college group, and so we were going to do a meeting somewhere, and so I sent a bunch of college students, and we went through a big old they went through a big old complex and put out about 300 or 400 flyers on the doors. Well, the next thing you know, they're calling me saying, you can't, not only can you not do this, you're going to have to come back and pick them all up. And so I lost that battle. I tried, but I lost that battle. I had to send the team back and go pick up all those flyers. So watch out on these apartment complexes. But they're good, because here's the thing. If somebody starts a house meeting in an apartment complex, parking is the #1 issue. There's no place to park. And I don't care what anybody says, and you can just let me, this will be the only place I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's a spirit in that. Obviously, part of it's just a little bit of greed because they don't buy enough property to put a bunch of extra parking spaces. But watch out, because parking is a real deal. Listen, I've been to a couple of meetings here and there, and man, there was no place to park in the entire complex. We were about ready to leave and drive the 40 miles back home. We could not get in that. There wasn't no place to park. Nice townhome type places, apartments and stuff. And just as we were about to give up, some people came out of their deal and got in the car and left, and it wasn't one of theirs marked off for them, and we were able to park there. So watch out for the apartments. Are going to have to be an issue, because we've got all these restrictions, and some of those need to be questioned. Parking is an issue in apartments. Children are a real issue in apartments. As far as people being able to bring their children. The good news is that a lot of times you can use those meeting houses. What do they usually call them? In an apartment complex, they have a community center, not a community center, but something, a rec room or whatever.
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse type place. Yes. And sometimes you can get those and have meetings there. And so I like that, because even if you have to pay for it, that's a great way to start something and to start inviting people in. But we're up against some issues in these new wineskins, with HOAs, with zoning, and that's always about parking. Even if you go rent a building, you're going to run into this deal. We can tell you how many bathrooms, how many parking spaces, on and on and on. The church I was at in Mississippi just bought, they're in a strip mall, kind of an old one, but they bought the building next to them. It used to be like a Western Auto or something, and I was in there, man, they built all these walls, they're doing all this stuff, and I'm like, well, how did y'all do this? Because, this is zoning, what about the, he said, brother, this is Mississippi. And he named a little bitty town there, and he said, this is X, Y, Z, Mississippi. He said, they don't care about that. I said, okay, brother. I wish it was. They were doing it right, don't get me wrong. So, okay. So, think about some of that if you have questions on the legal issue. But I just want to get that in your notes. I want you to be thinking about it. And preemptively, we got to get ahead of the curve. We need to be ahead of this thing. So, let's take a break.